Yeah, Janet, great to be on, and I hope my signal's okay from the Dallas
Perfect.
Capitol, which where I am. I was literally just meeting. I stepped out of a meeting to come over here and join. I mean, look, here's the thing. Mike Johnson, who you just played, I think, a clip of the speaker, he's correct in terms of how he's presenting the issue with the SAVE Act, which is our bill to require documentary citizenship vote in an American election. We had a hearing yesterday in the subcommittee on the Constitution, which I chaired, on the heels of a hearing we had where we had Alexis Nungare, the mom of Jocelyn Nungare. We had moms of a lot of the victims of the crimes that have been committed by people coming here illegally. So to get back to the core point, we believe it's a central issue right now that we make sure that only American citizens vote in American elections. We passed it overwhelmingly, unanimous support by Republicans. 5 Democrats joined us in July. But obviously, Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris, they don't want to move it. So we believed, and President Trump agreed, that we ought to pick a fight on this heading into the fall. So we did, and we've been talking about it. But, look, it is what it is when you're talking about spending and government funding issues. And I certainly share my concerns with things like continuing resolutions that continue to fund the priorities of the Biden administration, which we objectively oppose, right, with respect to Secret Service, the Department of Justice, IRS, the open borders. We don't want to continue funding this garbage, or Jack Smith over DOJ. But here's the deal. There's going to be a continuing resolution. So for all conservatives out there listening, well, what are you guys doing? Why would you do that? There's going to be one. The only question is what the flavor is, because it's a campaign season. The question is whether it's to December, whether it's to March, what it looks like, and whether we fight for anything. I believe we should fight for the SAVE Act in exchange for we'll agree to funding government through March. Clear the decks, have an election, decide the priorities next year. Unfortunately, a handful of my colleagues, including some of my more conservative colleagues, didn't like the idea of voting for the CR. So we don't have the votes currently to get it done. I think the speaker was correct. I do think we should have done that in July. I think we should have had the vote in July, passed the CR with the SAVE Act and browbeat Democrats over August, had the message building, and picked the fight in September. But I'd still do it now, but we got a handful of our colleagues who don't agree. So the likelihood is we end up with a CR to December and leave town and go campaign. That's just, it's the nature of the current environment in Washington.
So, it sounds like it's just a difference of strategy with some of the Republicans. Like, some wanted to use the SAVE Act to, protecting voting and trying to figure out how the best way to word this, the least damaging CR possible. And also protect the vote. Because as you said, the momentum in the House, and particularly when you look at what goes through the Senate, it's going to happen. And it's not saying that you're endorsing it. It's just being practical about how to best mitigate it.
And look, there's a time for certain fights.
Right.
Last year, earlier this year, last fall, we're not in the middle of election season. You can have a full, robust fight over spending, fight over a CR or not a CR. Look, we worked to get appropriations bills passed. We passed 5 out of 12. Look, conservatives opposed one of the last appropriations bills because it was a legislative branch appropriation. So we are where we are. It defies common sense heading into an election when we are now 50 whatever days out. Early voting has already started. To have a fight internally about what we should or shouldn't do about a certain level of spending with respect to the CR, when a CR is actually pretty conservative in its dollar amount. A CR is a freeze of spending. So if you freeze spending, you're doing better than most appropriations bills. I'd like to freeze spending to March, then get President Trump in, then have a full fight over the budget for 2026 and cutting spending. And I think it's going to be hard to do even then, but it's not possible to do between now and November. We just won't do it. You don't have the votes for a shutdown. You don't have the votes now for a CR plus save. So I think Speaker Johnson is probably going to end up having to put a short-term CR on the floor. We'll see. We're still talking about it. I'm open to suggestions. Everybody's frustrated in America with too much spending. Yeah. Everybody's frustrated in America with not having control of our elections and allowing illegals to vote. So we're trying to address those in good faith. You know who isn't? Democrats. So everybody kind of points your ire where it needs to be pointed, which is Democrats who won't work with us on any of it.
Yeah.
We're just trying to figure out how to navigate a complex environment in the fall.
And that was one of the things, talking with Congressman Chip Roy, that came up, in the debate last night with the border bill. And you've talked about HR 2, and this has been, obviously in Texas, this has been, one of, your lead issues. Because they always try to present it as, well, Republicans, they just wouldn't come to the table. We had a great border bill and Republicans just nixed it. It wasn't a great border bill.
No, I think, look, my answer to that question, when Kamala Harris made that charge and then tried to bait the president with the thing about going to the rallies, my answer would be really simple. That legislation you're talking about was a fraud. That would have codified your open borders policies and made them permanent, damaging this country with more illegals in perpetuity. Republicans were right to oppose it. They opposed it before President Trump did. And I'm proud to have opposed it because it's a disaster for our country. But you know what? The very bill that you're talking about would have codified the parole that led to the release of the two Venezuelans who bound and gagged and killed and raped a little precious 12-year-old girl, a girl that we should never forget, Jocelyn Nungare in Texas, whose beautiful young mom, Alexis Nungare, testified before the House Judiciary Committee yesterday. Hardly any Democrat showed up. A couple did. Hardly any showed up, showing a callous disregard for the impact of the Kamala Harris border czar, Joe Biden, Alejandro Mayorkas open borders that are killing Americans. And that's honestly, I would have pounded her in that debate on that issue, and I hope President Trump will going forward.
If they have another debate, I think he needs to bring you in for debate prep, because I got to tell you, I was left feeling like he didn't close the deal last night. And I tell, our audience, I'm not doing this to be mean or harsh. I feel like it's a winning strategy to know where you came up short and to fix it. And it's the losers who don't want to fix where they come up short, and they want to roll into an election and end up losing it because they don't want to fix anything. I felt like it was a wash. And I honestly, I don't think either of them won last night.
Yeah, look, I think the president did a good job making clear where he stands, and he punched back on some of the issues. Like he pointed out, hey, I fired a lot of people. You haven't fired anybody. You all these bureaucrats. I think he was clear that her policies on abortion to 9 months are absolutely ridiculous. He didn't have an answer to that. I think he hit on a number of other key issues. But I do think really needs to step on it if there's another debate or in future messaging, step on the fact that she has been a total disaster on the border. And that we should remember, Jocelyn Nungare. We should remember Kayla Hamilton. We should remember Rachel Marin. We should remember Laken Riley. We should remember Elizabeth Medina. I can keep going down the list. These are humans. The kids that have died from fentanyl. Personalize it. These open borders are killing people. Don't just pivot to Springfield, Ohio, and talk about dogs.
Right.
Talk about 20,000 Haitians being dumped on a town of 60,000 Americans who have been peacefully living there for years. And now this administration is destroying their home.
Yeah. And isn't it fair to say, too, that they try to deny, well, she wasn't the borders. She was more than that. She was more than what, just the nickname borders are. She was tasked by the administration, not just with issues at the border, but also the contributing factors that were driving people up from Central and South America to the border. So it sounds like the responsibilities far exceeded that. And so that means that her failure was even greater.
Yeah, look, she was neck deep in this. She knows exactly what she's doing. And there's evidence she was significantly a part of it by virtue of her title and her job to root out the root causes. We've had a massive flow coming up through Central America, through Mexico, into the United States. She's not just ignored it, perpetuated it. She's perpetuated the crisis that are killing Americans and killing migrants. Why don't we talk about 320,000 migrants who we've lost, according to the Inspector General from DHS? And why don't we talk about how dangerous it is with respect to Chinese nationals or the known foreign terrorists that are coming into our country? 99, according to a report from the House of Representatives Judiciary Committee, which we put out 2 weeks ago.
I wanted to ask you, too, about this issue that just came up with the Associated Press. We're talking with Congressman Chip Roy from Texas. The headline is election officials warn that widespread problems with the U.S. mail system could disrupt voting. Now, I'm trying to figure out, Congressman, how the Postal Service, whose total operating expenses were $85.4 billion for the year of 23, that was an increase. In 24, it was also an increase. They had $19.7 billion for the quarter, an increase of $410 million. Their budget's out of control. Why are there any issues with this?
Well, look, we know, your listeners, viewers know that when you talk about funding these government agencies, you're funding bureaucrats to do subpar work and to perpetuate bureaucracy. You're not funding excellence, right? FedEx wouldn't have this problem. They got to go compete. UPS wouldn't have this problem because they got to go compete. And the fact is, heading to election season, you got to wonder to some degree if it's purposeful. Maybe they'll choose to deliver some. Maybe they'll choose not to deliver others.